Hello and welcome to PS4 O'Clock. My name's Leon Hurley and this week I'm talking to Dave Meekleham about all the shooters coming to PS4. Right, I'm here with Dave, who is news ed for the magazine.
Hello.
Hello, and we're going to talk quickly about some of the PS4 shooters. I'm talking about first-person shooters here, quite surprisingly considering the wealth of games heading towards PS4. I think 140 is the number at the moment. There's only kind of 9 what I would call like true first-person shooters, and some of those are a bit sort of, well, one of them's an MMO, but it's still technically a first-person shooter. Obviously, the biggest one of the list is going to be Call of Duty Ghosts, simply because it is the biggest game in the world. Interestingly, I think this might be one that sort of suffers the most from transition to next gen, because it, prettiness aside, it does look basically like another COD.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Rubin's already come out and sort of kind of preempted expectations with, you know, don't expect a massive departure from what we expected, because it's, you know, like a lot of these games we're going to talk about, it's kind of straddling that cross-generation divide, so yeah, you won't see a substantial leap forward with the quality of the engine probably until, you know, another iteration down the line, so we should expect a shinier Call of Duty with a really good dog.
Yeah, with a good dog. I mean, they have basically said it's the old engine with like loads of new gen or next gen stuff slapped onto it. So
I mean, they've just been spitting and polishing that series, just without really radically doing anything to the engine, probably since COD 4. I mean, it's since COD 2 or 3, I would have thought, because it's always been ID Tech, I think. But it is, like you say, it's that cross-generational game. It's sort of spanning between the two, and I think you'll see this with a lot of the early games, is they will be kind of old tech buffed up to the new standards, and then it won't be until the second round maybe of games you'll see these sort of incredible advances. Which brings me on to the next game, which is sort of Call of Duty Ghosts' rival, Battlefield 4. Now that is looking quite spectacular, but then DICE have always sort of worked quite heavily with very top spec PCs, so in a way they're very well placed to work on PS4. I think the key with Battlefield 4, I mean, certainly I think we saw a 64-player battle at E3, which looked great, and they're really trying to emphasise, you know, all the dynamic destruction now is, you know, it's you're in complete control of it, so it's not scripted. So that moment where, you know, the skyscraper tumbles, that is players through their actions actually toppling it. The big thing is it really has to get the single player sorted, because Battlefield's always been great multiplayer wise, but
Battlefield 3, the single player was fairly abysmal. It felt like a very badly kind of hacked retread of Call of Duty 4 actually, and some of the AI was really awful. So they've got to sort of get that right, but they have been.
But it's got Omar in it, so yeah.
Got Omar in it. Yeah, I mean, Carl Magnus Trodson, who's DICE's general manager, has been talking about how they want to bring multiplayer elements into the single player, and they're talking about sort of having the scope to, you know, take different approaches, so full-on attacks, sneaky sniper rifle stuff, and also just sort of that open landscape and not being sort of hemmed into a linear.
I mean, it'd be certainly good on those lines if you could customise your loadout if you want to kind of bring in multiplayer sensibilities. That's something that Black Ops 2 did quite effectively.
The next game we're going to talk about is PlayStation's kind of flagship shooter, really, isn't it? Which is Killzone Shadow Fall.
Yeah, certainly the flagship launch title, or certainly exclusive launch title.
And it does look lovely, especially considering some of the rumours are saying that what we've seen so far have only been using, I think, sort of 3 or 4 gig of RAM, 2 gig of RAM, which is what some of the original dev kits were sent out with. So
that's essentially a quarter of what's available, isn't it? So
it's interesting because this is kind of like a reboot. We're 30 years in the future. The Helghast and the ISA, or the Vectons, seem to somehow live together in this kind of Helghan enclave, and these sort of terrorist kind of insurgents kind of causing trouble. So it doesn't look like more of the same. It doesn't look like the previous Killzones were kind of characterised by big trudgy brown planets and, you know, shooting orange eyes in the distance.
I mean, that's the most exciting thing from my perspective. You know, it seems like Guerrilla finally found the felt trip drawer that Sony have been preventing them from using for years, and you know, it's this colour palette that really seems to distinguish it. I mean, the action from what we've seen, you know, at E3, the mechanics do look, you know, quite similar. Like you can really see there's a pronounced weight to everything. So
and you've got the owl is another new thing, which is this kind of all-purpose drone, and that uses the touchpad. So depending on whether you swipe forward, backwards, left, or right on the touchpad, you activate different modes. So it can be like an attack dog. It can have a shield. It can show you sort of through walls what's happening, and you can also use it as a portable zip line. Cool. Now, next is Destiny. Now, this is an MMO, but it is a shooter. So it's sort of it's in terms of genre, it's a shooter, but it's going to be quite a deep, quite a big. They're calling that kind of shared world thing, isn't it? You're going to be playing.
I mean, obviously, the big headline is Bungie finally brings a game to PlayStation. I mean, like, if you're not familiar with Bungie, if you have just been playing PlayStation or Xbox the last 10 years, then Bungie essentially, almost single-handedly redefined how shooters work on consoles. A lot of the mechanics that we now take for granted. You're only allowed to carry 2 weapons, things like the whole concept of console multiplayer.
I mean, Call of Duty did pretty similar things. I mean, they have
on the multiplayer side with kind of Halo 2, and now they
have made one of the most successful kind of shooter.
They're bringing all that experience with
another platform.
Yeah, they're bringing all that experience to bear now, and like a massive multiplayer world. It's very exciting because Bungie have always been brilliant at weapon balancing and things like that, and they're really they want to get across that this world will seem persistent and alive, and essentially it'll be completely informed by dynamic emergent events rather than scripted I think it could be a
fascinating experience because there is this sort of social side of it. They seem to be implying there'll be more to it than just the actual game itself, so it's a bit of a mystery, but like you say, it's a very influential, very talented studio
with all the money in the world
with all the money in the world. Now, a slightly smaller scale game, but I actually played this the other day and I loved it, is Wolfenstein The New Order. So it's a new Wolfenstein. It's set in the 60s where the Nazis have...
Do you say Steen? I said Stein.
Wolfenstein. I don't know, actually.
Tomato.
Tomato. But yeah, set in the 60s. You play BJ Blastovich, whatever his name is.
Blastovich.
I can never remember his name. But it's brilliantly kind of... It's not stupid, but it captures... Wolfenstein used to be about kind of almost just going mad with guns, running around, shooting everything, and it was a bit kind of... not tongue-in-cheek, but it was a bit silly because you were so overpowered with these guns. And I played it, and I was running around. I had 2 like semi-automatic shotguns. I was dual-wielding them. One point, I couldn't even see what I was shooting at. I was just squeezing the triggers. Germans were screaming.
Is this the first Wolfenstein to come out in a PlayStation console?
No, we had the previous one, which was not great. I still played it because I like the series, and
I just always I can associate it with being a PC shooter.
It was in the past. Yeah, there's been a few on PlayStation, but this is it's really, it looks lovely. The robots and the kind of the Nazi kind of steampunk kind of tech, they're big and clunky, and they really were, and the sort of the environment comes apart when you shoot stuff. Like there's a shootout in this museum about how the Nazis went to the moon, and you're having a shootout and this big model of the moon's falling apart. You've got like a laser cutter that you can cut through panels and make little holes to shoot through. It's really big, it's really noisy, and I really, really enjoyed it. I was really surprised. I was hoping it would be good, and yeah, like I say, I played it for half an hour. Really, really good fun. Which brings us on to another MMO style thing, which is PlanetSide 2. Now, this is a game that already exists on PC. It's a bit like kind of Dust 514, but it's not tied into anything else. It's just a massive kind of online shooter. It's free to play, which is interesting, so you can either grind your way through rewards in order to unlock things, or you can pay to unlock them. Its real key thing is it's meant to be, it's meant to be huge. It's meant to be big battles, big kind of rolling kind of conflicts. And it's done really well on PC. You sort of see some of the footage of it, and the scale of it does look really sort of impressive.
Is it all robots?
No, it's you got sort
like
of
mech suits and things like that.
I think it's got like vehicles and stuff in it, but it's it's a class-based shooter. But yeah, free to play, large. It'll be interesting to see how it goes down. I think they've already said they're not going to be doing any kind of cross-play, so PC and PS4 won't be playing. But there's a lot of games like that, and a couple of other games we'll look at in a minute, where they're PC kind of based, making the move over, and it'll be interesting to see how they go down and how well received they are. Which brings us on to Blacklight Retribution, another game that's also on PC and is another free-to-play game. There's already been a Blacklight, I think it was Tango Down on PS3. That was a PSN shooter. This is free-to-play, so again you can sort of buy things to upgrade and mess around with your sort of weapons and stuff, or you can unlock them by playing through it. This has got mechs in it, big robot sort of big stompy kind of giant things, and it's technical term, but it looks quite good. It's gone down quite well on PC, and the free to play thing is interesting because you're not losing anything if you want to try it out.
I mean, seems to be like a new trend for, obviously not for people coming from a PC market, but certainly with consoles, free to play really it's not been particularly prevalent with certainly big shooters before in previous generations, has it?
I think the problem with free to play is it's been free to play in the past has been much more associated with kind of browser based things and mobile things, and on the console there's not been any kind of business sort of history of it, so people have been a bit slow to sort of test it out because I guess it's not been clear if it is financially viable. But these games have been hugely successful, and also they've proved that you can have free-to-play stuff and it isn't a bit cheap and a bit shonky. These are big-budget kind of looking games, like Blacklight and PlanetSide 2. You wouldn't look at them and go, oh, it's a free-to-play shooter. You'd look at it and go, that's a AAA console shooter in this case. And I think they're winning over, and Sony's much more kind of open with online stuff, much more kind of sort of hugging the sort of indie developers and bring us your stuff and we'll use it.
Come here, you.
It's a much more open... Yeah, come here, you little... It's a much more open platform. I think it's going to do quite well. And something this next game's doing, Primal Carnage.
No, this
Genesis,
is the one. This is bizarrely the one I'm really excited about because I'm obsessed with dinosaurs.
You've got a huge.
I've been pining. Like there essentially hasn't been a decent dinosaur game since probably PS1 Dino Crisis 2. So that's over 10 years ago. So this is, really quite exciting. It's episodic. Hopefully it won't turn out like Jurassic Park the game, which was very upsetting. But it's the demo, certainly the video footage of like a Tyrannosaur we saw recently was really impressive. It uses the Unreal 4 engine, and developer Lukewarm Media has admitted that Far Cry 3 was a big inspiration to it, just the way the tropical setting. Interestingly, the original Far Cry was originally going to have dinosaurs rather than the kind of stupid mutants it had. It was originally be like Tyrannosaurs and Raptors and stuff.
I think the interesting thing with this is you mentioned it's episodic. The developers have sort of talked about how each episode will introduce new dinosaurs, obviously, but also kind of new mechanics. And so you'll have sort of almost like each episode will have different sort of features to it, and you won't basically be playing the same game over and over again. I think that's one of the problems with anything kind of episodic is that if it's something like a shooter, there's basically one mechanic. So each episode would be repeating that mechanic. This will change and evolve, and
I mean they've already talked about stealth, which and that's, you can see where that's come from Far Cry 3, and the puzzle solving elements as well, rather than just all out blasting. So
so it'll be interesting to see what that does, especially these sort of free to play and the episodic ones. But that's basically the dedicated first person shooter lineup on PS4. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different shooters. It seems quite small, but then none of them at all look weak in any way, which I think is quite encouraging. I'd rather have 9 really interesting looking games than say 20 and half of those be a bit
And I think what we'll soon see, maybe in a year, 18 months time, when some of these games are cross generation, I think what we'll see going forward when shooters are just designed for PS4 from the groundwork up, I think we'll see truly like massive online games, maybe 128, 200 players, and really pushing the genre forward in terms of destructibility and environments, which I think certainly the Frostbite engine will be capable of going forward. So exciting times ahead.